Okay, and we are live. So, welcome to episode 129 of An American Werewolf in New Jersey. I am the American Werewolf. As much as possible, in the second year of this show, I've been working on interviews, and I really enjoy those a lot. And that has led to quite a few morning shows because some of the people that I've been interviewing have been our friends across the pond. And I had Tony Atherton on about a month or so ago, and he was over there in Glasgow. And only my psycho friend Marty over in Dublin agrees to stay up to my end of things, which means his stream in Dublin doesn't even start till like 1 a.m. local time. But these morning shows have been really great. And this is one that I've been looking forward to a lot. Tonight on the show, or today on the show, because it's morning here, it's 11 a.m. here in the East Coast. I've got, it's Julia Morgan. That's correct, right? I've got Julia Morgan Scorpion. And I've really been looking forward to this one. We connected a bit on Twitter and just started having a few exchanges, talking about horror and movies and audiobooks. And, then we started going back and forth with film recommendations. And it's just, for me, and I was saying this earlier, I'm going to be 54 in November. You figure that you're a somewhat cemented person. At that age, you kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like. But my interactions with you have provided a lot of new insights with just small adjustments in my thinking. And I've been really appreciative of that. And so looking forward to having you on the show. So please, welcome. And thanks for taking the time out to come and hang out for a little bit and shoot the breeze.
Thank you. I have absolutely no idea. Does that mean talk about nothing in particular, or?
Well, we'll play it by ear and just see where it goes. I'm not exactly used to conducting interviews, but I've been doing them, and they've been turning out okay so far. And for me, just for the purposes of this show, they're kind of just sort of loose conversations. So, it's not some structured, rigid thing or anything like that. And, don't go left and don't go right and, stay right in the middle. We start off with, just some questions, some responses, and have a free-flowing conversation from there, just like you would if you were, talking to somebody in a coffee house or a pub. You don't walk into there with your friends, with an agenda of 4 things that you're going to talk about. I'd like to treat it the same way here. So welcome to the show. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, hold on a second. We've already got some comments. We've got Freddie D. I was blocked by that person on Twitter. I hope that wasn't me. Not sure why, but either way, I'm sure this will be a fun episode. I believe that is correct. Okay. The Standing Wanderer says, good afternoon. Hello there, Standing Wanderer. And my friend Marty over there in Dublin. He says, yo, Mike at work, but fired out a pimp tweet. Will go back on replay. Checked out Julia's YouTube and Twitter, and she seems like an awesome person. Thanks, Marty. Marty was on the show, was it last week? It was last week at 8 p.m. Eastern time, so it was like 1 p.m. There in Dublin, and stayed with us for over an hour. And I always appreciate it when Marty takes some time to hang out with us. He's a really good guy. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're located, where a little bit of background. Tell us a little bit.
Well, I'm 60 years of age, soon to be 61. Okay. I'm living in London. I'm in a basement flat, which is built on a hill. So it's basement at the front, first floor at the back. Got a balcony. I spend a lot of my days listening to audiobooks, listening to, on YouTube, I love the creepypastas, so I listen to a lot of those. I play video games a lot. I hang around on social media a lot. And, I watch a lot of horror movies.
Those are all fine qualities. In my estimation, those are all fine qualities. I avoid gaming And, it can be just as easy to say that, I turn my nose up at it. But the truth of it is that I feel that if I actually start gaming, like I'll just drop out of life completely because I've already got my nose in books and movies and, then the show and then the movies for the show and, so on and so forth. And so it's just a cycle. And then if I throw gaming into it, you're just never going to hear from me at all. And you'll just be a stack of pizza boxes as high as my front door or something. And, that'll be all she wrote pretty much. So how did you get into gaming? I mean, everybody does it nowadays. And I've heard people say that, gaming is the new way that people become friends because, you've got these interactive games where you're just, you actually build relationships. And I used to be a teacher, not anymore. But the kids would that was how they would bond, from their homes in their living rooms or their own rooms or whatever, interacting with these other people. How did that start?
Well, it actually began. I want to start off with that. I started playing Pong, the very first video game ever invented.
Sounds
because
good.
A friend of mine got the game, but I have to say I was really not impressed. After about 5 minutes, I was like, "Is this it?" So it took a few more years before Space Invaders came out, and every pub would have a Space Invaders machine. So I wasn't rich, so I had to limit myself a lot. But I did like to play that, and then it was Galaxian, Xevious. Some friends of mine got an NES console. Then I got myself, what did I get? The first thing I got was a Game Boy. Then I got a Sega Mega Drive, Sega Saturn, PlayStation 1. And, I wouldn't say it was a wasted youth at all because I really enjoyed it. But yes, it's, so that's why I started getting into audiobooks as well. Another hobby I had for a long time was embroidery. I still do a bit now and again. So where audiobooks come in, is that something you can do whilst playing a game or whilst doing the housework, or whilst doing something else.
Sure.
So it's a way to, I think, maximize my enjoyment of life. And well, I've got this thing called fibromyalgia. So I used to use the public library service, which had a lot of audiobooks, mostly on cassette. But getting out of the house and carrying things became more and more painful. So I found this online organization called LibriVox, LibriVox.
I know it.
And free audiobooks. So I listened to a lot of those, and after a while I felt guilty because I was taking for them and not giving anything back. So I thought I'd record a little bit for them, and when I felt I'd done enough to pay them back, I just stopped doing it. And I ended up, I didn't actually enjoy it straight away, but I enjoyed feeling valuable, as we all need to be valued. And, some people valued what I was doing.
Sure.
So, but after a while, I began to enjoy it. And I began to enjoy it a bit more. What held me back early on was I was very aware of my inadequacies because I had listened to so many professionally recorded audiobooks, because I've seen some incredible stage acting, and obviously movies. And I became very aware that I was nowhere near their standard. And that inhibited me. It took me quite some time before I had the courage to start the YouTube channel. And a lot of that is down to an author called W.H. Pugmire, Willem, who liked what I was doing, and mutual acquaintance suggested I record one of his stories, which I did, and kind of really took off from there. And Willem was he was patronized. Oh, that's the wrong word. His patron, his mentor, was Robert Bloch, the author of Psycho.
Oh,
and Robert Bloch was mentored by H.P. Lovecraft.
Wow.
And then so Willem mentored me and a whole lot of other people. And, you know, so I, in my turn, try to help other people as much as I can.
That's a huge broth of support.
Yes.
Wow. That's a rich tapestry. Wow. That's fantastic. Can I ask a question?
I'm still going. Yes.
One of I've talked to you a little bit about this. I've thrown my own hand a little bit into audiobook recording, and you can do things for like self-publishing authors like ACX, through ACX and those sorts of things. And then there are always, organizations that work for like the visually impaired, when they're always looking for volunteer work and, things like that. But I mean, my, limited, ankle deep observation, it's not simple. It's not simple work. People think that it's just reading, but and maybe this is just my experience, but I'm here and I'm doing this, and I'm doing it from my own room. And the reason I started podcasting is because I wanted to get into audiobook narration. This was something I've always wanted to do. It's 1,000 times harder than I thought it was going to be. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, and maybe it's just an issue of practice, but I tell them, read something for 3 minutes with no errors. I mean, if you're going to hold yourself to a high standard, if you're going to hold yourself to a standard, just pick anything. It could be trade journal. Maybe you don't like to read. You like reading, Scandalized magazine, or whatever it is. Some trash thing, whatever. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be, Faust or Milton or anything like that. But I said, try reading 3 to 5 minutes, error free. No no ahs, no rolling the words. These sorts of things. So it's you're talking about these things that you're doing, but they deserve appreciation because I know, like I said, just from my limited experience doing it, and wanting to throw my hat back in, it's not simple stuff.
Well, I edit. You see, I probably couldn't read for 5 minutes without making a mistake. So whenever I make a mistake, I make this. When you do this, you get a big spike of sound on your recording, so you can see where you've made a mistake. And then I go back to the last punctuation mark and do it again. So I edit quite heavily.
Okay. See, the pluses and minuses of the DIY sort of mentality is that sometimes you literally are doing it on your own, and so it can be difficult to get feedback. Same with podcasting. I've no one has shown me like anything. All these things I've learned by myself, and sometimes even with just a little bit of feedback, it makes all the difference. That never would have occurred to me. Okay.
Well, if you should ever choose to volunteer recording for LibriVox, then they give you tutorials on editing and how to edit.
I'll take a
look. So they do an awful lot to make it easy for you. Okay. But actually interpreting the words, that can be a problem. That is where professional audiobook readers sometimes have editors who can tell them, no, you put the emphasis on the wrong word, you need to do that bit again. Whereas I don't have that. So occasionally there are errors. Every now and again there's a sentence I'm not quite sure what it means, so I just have to busk it and try and make it sound as if I know what it means and hope for the best.
And especially trying to avoid that, especially with the with the issue of copyright. You're using work that may be upwards of 100 years old, so context from 2022 isn't always very helpful. So I mean it's kind of complicated. Hold on a second. We've got the Standing Wanderer who says he's from Dublin as well. Okay, so Dublin's in the house here tonight. But then Marty has a question. He asks, Julia, have you ever crossed paths with Drick Mags?
I don't recall that name at all, so probably not.
Marty, can you give us some context as to who this is? The name isn't familiar to either of us. So if you're still in the chat, pop by and ask, give us some fill in the blank a little bit with that. So, I mean, you've also, and you've got quite a collection on your YouTube channel. It's a varied collection and authors I've never heard of before. You've got a great voice for it, by the way.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. I like it. I like to listen to it a lot. But you're also introducing me, and then I guess by extension other people, into authors that, or lesser known authors perhaps, that aren't the big standout names, which I'm sure is always appreciative. The Samurai Ghost Story.
That's a guy called Lafcadio Hearn.
Beautiful
Victorian.
tale.
Oh, I'm glad you like that. Well, there's a fucked up. Excuse me. Try not to swear here.
No, not for my sake. Everything can pretty much go here. We're good.
There are a lot of his books available online. I'm sure. I think they're free. Project Gutenberg is a good source for it, and he was very big at the time. This is almost completely forgotten now, but at the time he was writing, he was one of the big cheeses.
Okay. And you also have some M.R. James. You don't see anybody talking about M.R. James. I have an M.R. James collection, hardcover.
We need to get a podcast to the curious, the M.R. James podcast. There's a podcast all devoted to his work, to his life, to his imitators, and it's one of my favorite podcasts. So,
and he was the predecessor to Poe, wasn't he?
No, no. Edgar Allan Poe was early Victorian, and M.R. James was early 20th century.
Okay, Lovecraft then. Was it Lovecraft?
Lovecraft and M.R. James were writing at approximately the same time. Yes.
Contemporaries. Okay, all right. Yeah. Well, thanks for straightening that out. So, I learned something too. All right, that's good. Marty says that the Dirk Maggs, he directed a bunch of Audible sci-fi plays.
Right. I don't think I've listened to any of the Audible. Gosh, well done you. I don't think I could do that.
I think Marty works in a place that's. I think Marty works in a place that's friendly to this kind of stuff. So he's got a good gig. Gig. So,
no, I don't think the only science fiction ones I've listened to a Warhammer novel, and I've got some Adrian Tchaikovsky lined up, but I haven't got around to listening to them yet.
The Warhammer, I'm hearing so much about it nowadays. It's very big. It's very big nowadays. Yeah. And I haven't really spent any time reading any of those. Maybe my favorite job ever was working at a bookstore. God, I love that job. I was the inventory guy in the back. So when the pallets came out with 50 boxes of books, I was the first person to bring them out and look at them and, hold them close to, if one really grabbed my fancy or, maybe that one wasn't making out to maybe one of them wasn't making it out to the shelf that night. So I would buy it after my shift was over, so on and so forth. But there are just so many authors that you're bringing to light. You even you covered some Adam Neville.
Yes, he gave me permission to record part of End of Days, which is a brilliant novel, by the way. I would strongly recommend people read that.
I haven't read that. I haven't read Cunning Folk. I have read The Ritual. And I've been trying to get him on the show for a while, but he's a busy fella.
He is a busy fellow, yes.
He's got a lot going on. I think that I'll take a look at these other books, but I think that The Ritual is criminally underrated and overlooked. And it's a fantastic film. One of the best. Netflix usually doesn't touch horror very much. But it's just a fantastic and original story. They did a great job usually, and the book is better, of course, because the book is always better. But fantastic stuff, and I'm hoping one of these days I'll be able to get him on here as well.
I hope so too.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool. I like doing these sorts of conversations, where you're just talking to people and it's just, you're just shooting the breeze. And, I remember a long time ago, Dean Cain at the time in the 90s was playing Superman, and, that television show from the 90s, and it was very popular. And he was doing interviews, and I remember I was like, really? He's doing interviews? And a buddy of mine who was much more of a fan of the show than I was at the time, he wasn't, and he said, well, he's not like sticking a microphone in your face, like, what do you think about this? He's like, they would just be sitting there playing some Sega, and just, shooting a conversation that way, and talking while they're playing the game. And I think that's a much better format for talking, rather than, I've got 20 questions for you, and, answer this, and, don't say that, and, that sort of thing. So, the more people I can have on here, the better, and it's worked out so far. How did you get? Oh, so wait, let me close out that. Well, not close out, but let me ask this question about audiobooks. Do you have any aspirations? Is there anything that you want to, like goals? Like I want to check this box when it comes to audiobooks. I know you said you're not an Alan Moore fan. This, that, and the other. I was listening to Jerusalem. I don't listen to audiobooks very often. And had Simon Vance on there, who I think did a really good job. But is there any author you'd want to cover, or any title, or?
I really would consider it the high spot of my recording career if I was allowed to record a short story by Agatha Christie called The Seance.
Okay.
People don't normally associate her with horror, but she did write some horror stories. And let me tell you, The Seance is one of the nastiest I've ever read.
Okay.
And I actually did try to contact the estate of Agatha Christie to ask permission, but they completely ignored me, which is fair enough. But one day it's going to be out of copyright, and if I'm still alive, I'm recording it.
Send a follow-up. I mean, that happens.
Try.
I've had some success with that, even with interviews on the show. I've had a couple of film directors on, this, that, and the other, and I didn't hear anything back. And then I'd get, hey, just checking in again. And, I sent you this, and, and then I would just say, hey, please, even if the answer is no, just, give me some kind of response, so I can gauge where I'm at with things. And most people are pretty, reasonable. When it comes to that sort of thing. And I'd rather hear no than hear nothing. True. So my suggestion would just be to, send a quick follow-up, that sort of thing, and see where it goes.
I might try that. But I do believe that if you spend too much time trying to get through a doorway that's closed, you might be missing a whole lot of other doors that are open.
So, sure. I mean, I'm just talking about an email. I'm just talking about an email, and then see where it goes from there. So, one of the things that even more so than we've talked about, more than audiobooks, is horror. How did you develop a penchant or a love for that genre, and was it a literary? Sort of fascination? Was it cinema? Was it both? How did that kick off? For me, years ago, it was the old Universal classics. Through my parents, my mom especially was a horror fan. Then later with Hammer, and then developing my own tastes for those sorts of things. How did that start with you? Started with books. Okay.
As far as I can remember, I was about 6 or 7. It was the Armada books of great ghost stories, which were aimed at children. So there's nothing particularly terrifying in those. Then, age 9, I managed to get my hands on a copy of Carmilla, which I read over and over again, but that was partly because I didn't have very many books. But then at some point, I discovered Poe before I discovered Lovecraft. And then I discovered Lovecraft and became a rabid horror maniac after that. His book, The Supernatural Horror in Literature, became pretty much my reading list. But not that I've read everything on it, but quite a lot of it. And I had a lovely great aunt. She wasn't my great aunt, she was my aunt. My Aunt Margaret gave me a book called Great Tales of Terror and the Supernatural. And that was the one that introduced me to Lovecraft. I remember that. So that was a lovely surprise. Meanwhile, at around age 9 or 10, I developed a crush on Christopher Lee. So then, of course, I had to see the horror movies when they came on TV.
Yes.
And the Vincent Price. Vincent Price is still to this day my favorite actor. I love Vincent Price. And the ones that he made with Roger Corman. And, the Pit and the Pendulum, the Oblong Box. Mind you, I'm not sure the Oblong Box was the Oblong Box wasn't Corman, but I can't remember who it was.
Was Tower of London in that?
Tower of London, isn't that a Karloff film?
No, it's Vincent Price.
Ooh.
I'm pretty sure. The one where he's playing Henry III?
Richard III.
Richard III.
I'd have to Google that to be sure.
You talk, I'll Google.
Yes. But the ones that Roger Corman did were for American International Pictures, and it was like The Raven. That was with Boris Karloff, young Jack Nicholson, an actress called Hazel Court, who I still adore. She was my fantasy big sister because I didn't have a big sister. I thought if I had a big sister, it would be Hazel Court.
Okay. Tower of London is a 1962 historical drama and horror film directed by Roger Corman, starring Vincent Price and Michael Pate.
Good Lord.
Produced by Gene Corman, Michael Pate, Joan Freeman, Robert Brown. 1962. That one I remember because it's just
that is one that completely passed me by.
It's so ridiculously over the top.
Film.
No, that was Vincent Price.
Oh, I'll have to dig that one out from somewhere. Now, I'm just right now seeing some of the photographs from it. Yes.
He was definitely, I think, I think so many, and we were talking about this with Peter Cushing. So many of those men and the women at the time cast in those movies were underrated.
Oh, completely.
And now, and you and I have touched on this. People talk about genre bias and horror, but horror produces a lot of crap. And I think the crap drowns out the good stuff, and then people just keep consuming the crap and then wondering why they get genre bias. But I mean, these sorts of performers like Lee and Cushing, and Vincent Price, who were just these hyper intelligent people, just. They wouldn't. There aren't people today, and we were talking about this yesterday, very briefly on Twitter. Peter Cushing, it just the intellect. He would have so few equals today.
Yeah.
It's a shame. I think Christopher Lee to some extent later in life. As he became
he's an original character.
And then he moved into the Star Wars, whatever you think of the prequels, and then finally with Tolkien.
I'm more interested in his moving into heavy metal.
That's a great album.
Becoming a heavy metal singer in his 80s, that is a real achievement.
That's really, really good stuff. Now you could pull that up on Spotify or iTunes or whatever it is anytime and just have a good old time listening to that. One of the few, Christopher Lee was one of the few men who actually, I think he was the only person on the set of Lord of the Rings who had actually met Tolkien. Had that firsthand experience. You know, the action stars or the horror stars of today pale in comparison to these people. They were giants. You know, I mean, even you know, the people take for granted the revolutionary effect of Hammer in film. You know, even actresses like Valerie Gaunt, who revolutionized what it was like to be, you know, the bride of Dracula. You know, when Terence Fisher did that first movie, you know, they went from that Todd Browning sort of thing where they all looked like these skinny, withdrawn sort of things to these, you know, someone like Gaunt who literally became a femme fatale. You know, I mean, you know, and then from there, you know, every movie after that, you know, even going into, you know, Coppola's Dracula, which I'm not a fan of necessarily, you know, or today, you know, with, you know, Dracula 2000, you know, it impacted, you know, the way horror is perceived today. They're just fantastic, fantastic stuff. To some extent, I think Hammer is still in production. Isn't that the case?
I believe they're still going, yes. They did the remake of The Woman in Black, which I have to say I was really not impressed with.
The one with Daniel Radcliffe.
Yes. They sort of peddled the ending far too much. They wimped out. You know, the TV version scared the hell out of me. I was grabbing hold of my cat.
Some of those old BBC productions don't get their credit. My favorite interpretation of Dracula, aside from Herzog's Nosferatu, is the BBC interpretation from 1977 that I saw with Louis Jordan. I saw that as a child, and it was like Saturday night on my local PBS, you know, public television, and it scared the daylights out of me. Fantastic. It was like 3 hours long, which was unheard of back then in 1977 to have a 3-hour horror movie. And it was just great. To this day, I still own a copy. I have a copy on DVD. They've never remastered it and pressed it for Blu-ray. But it's fantastic stuff. So you move and get your start. So wait, how old were you when you got these Lovecraft novels?
10 or 11.
Oh, geez.
I later discovered that I had actually read a Lovecraft story before, but it was The Moonbog, which I think is possibly his weakest story. Just didn't register with me until after I'd been reading Lovecraft for a while. That, oh, he wrote The Moonbog? Okay. He can't win every time, but...
Well, that must be a double-edged sword, though, because it must spoil you for, you know, the vast majority of things that come after that. I mean, like for me, my first exposure into horror was a horror anthology. I'll never forget it. It was called Dark Forces. And
Kirby McCauley.
Pardon?
Kirby McCauley. Was he the editor? Dark Forces. I'll just have to Google that one.
He might have been. I don't remember. I was about 10 or so. But the first story in it was Kings of the Mist, which is something at that age I had never read and didn't know that type of horror existed, which is very much in the Lovecraft style. Although,
yes, here it is, Kirby McCauley. Oh my God! Well, if you've got £209.69, you can pick up a copy from Abe Books. They've got some cheaper ones, but seriously.
I might have to do that because for some reason, a lot of books along the way sort of disappeared with me. I have to figure out what happened to them. I'm not exactly sure. But I had a first edition hardcover. I think I spent like $5 because I was in like a science fiction book club or something like that. But I mean, you know, that would make you extremely selective. I would think to start out at 10 years old with Lovecraft and then picking, you know, other authors after that. Did you find a lot of disappointment after that? You're like, this is trash. Or did you just enjoy all of it, take it for what it is?
Well, I'd say that, like, it's like with movies, a lot of it isn't that good. A lot of it is, by some people's definition, good, but just doesn't ring my bell. Lovecraft is Lovecraft, and M.R. James is M.R. James, and you've got Arthur Machen and Algernon Blackwood, and just sort of thinking, getting blocked now. I was thinking of all the names crowding to my forehead and not being able to pick one. But different authors have different styles. Sometimes you like the style, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you like the type of story they come up with, sometimes you don't. I've got some blind spots. I can't take to Robert Eichmann. Loads of people think he's wonderful. I'm like, don't see the point of him at all. Then there's Ronald Chetwynd Hayes, an author I actually got to know in my 20s. And, at his height, he was every bit as good as people like Algernon Blackwood. He did later in life write a lot of pot boilers, but he's one author that is not completely forgotten, but almost. And that's, so I don't like it when people I consider worthy of reading are getting forgotten, And so one of the things that I try and do on my YouTube channel is, as well as the usual suspects, to try and find some lesser known authors, or in some cases just pick out stories that scared the shit out of me when I first read them. Like there's one called The Coat. I actually forget right now the name of the author, but a short story called The Coat, and it's about a haunted coat. And that might, saying it out loud, a haunted coat, sounds rather naff, but I remember when I read it, I nearly dropped the book. I was that scared.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, no, I mean, I think that is what, makes the soup, different tastes, different preferences, so on and so forth. For me personally, at this age, I want a story. Yes. Give me a story.
Beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
Not just a stream of impressions. That doesn't do it for me.
Yeah. Give me characterization, whether it be in, written, whether it be written or on the screen. Character is kind of king at this point, because I'm not, 21 anymore, and I'm not, necessarily impressed by big splashy special effects or, gore for gore's sake. And you certainly know.
But I do like a nice monster.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I do like monsters.
Absolutely. When we talked about just now, talking about Adam Neville's The Ritual, that creature is wholly original. That's a wholly original creature. And every once in a while you'll get a good monster. And so because of those things, I appreciate it all the more when people, at least according to my tastes, do it right. That's a good thing. So one of the things we've also talked about is the state of horror today, because we're coming off bedrock, solid bedrock with the Universal Classics. For Halloween this past year at my local cinema houses, they had the original Claude Rains, The Invisible Man, which I had never seen before. I just thought it was fantastic. Because he's insane. It has nothing to do with the invisibility. And I saw the roots of so many different characters that we see in today's storytelling, whether it be the comic book heroes or horror or whatever. And they had a double feature with that and the Wolfman, the original with Chaney Jr. There are so many of those great movies, Todd Browning's Dracula and Frankenstein, and going into 54 with The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and then you start to move into 57 with Terrence Fisher, with The Curse of Frankenstein, and we're introduced to Peter Cushing, and then 58 with Christopher Lee, he takes the helm, and that went on for several decades, and then the 70s had a nice run. of horror with Friedkin's The Exorcist, or and then a lot of Exorcist hangover, so on and so forth. And then I don't know, it kind of got spotty, and it got into franchises and things like that. But you pointed out to me. Go ahead, would you?
I'm just thinking that, well, strictly speaking, the Peter Cushing Frankenstein was a franchise, and so was the Christopher Lee Dracula a franchise.
Right. It's very
And some of them were good, some of them were bad, some of them were fun.
Yeah.
But Christopher Lee had to be emotionally blackmailed into carrying on. They told him all these people are going to be out of work if you don't agree to do another Dracula, and he ended up hating it. One of them has I can't remember which one it was. I think it might be Dracula, Prince of Darkness. I mean, she's got no lines. Yeah. And that's because the script was so bad, he absolutely refused to say anything.
I love that one. I have most of those on DVD. And there are so many pictures out today of him just looking angry, yes. On the set. And it's funny because there are a lot of them where he's surrounded by like all these beautiful, brides of Dracula, and he just looks pissed off the whole time.
I tell you,
got a big drink in his hand.
If you'd ever seen pictures of Christopher Lee's wife, she was an ad. I can't remember her maiden name, but Birgitta Lee, and Gita used to call her, and she was just so stunningly beautiful. That no insult to all of those ladies but he was probably thinking hamburger. He definitely had steak at home.
Good for him. And that's interesting too, because one of I think the second show, episode 2 that we did here was Todd Browning's Dracula, and we talked about how Lugosi sort of refused to accept that he had kind of been typecast. And to his detriment. He fell into depression and then, addiction and so on and so forth. And we contrasted that with Christopher Lee, who was not pleased, but said, hey, I guess, coming off the war, World War II, in which case, he was active in that, and suddenly he's the leading man in a movie, and he's not rich by any standards. I think the equivalent for what they paid him for Horror of Dracula today would be like $30,000 or something like that. It was like 150 pounds or 1,500 pounds or something like that. But I mean, he, reluctantly he embraced it, and then just his career just eventually just elevated towards the end of his life, like you said, he's making metal albums. He's starring as Saruman and, all these different things.
But Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee were close personal friends. And I wonder how much of Mr. Lee's attitudes was influenced by Peter Cushing, who was an older and more established actor. Peter Cushing made a movie with Laurel and Hardy, A Chump at Oxford. So he was definitely a veteran actor. But when Peter Cushing found out that he was typecast, or was told that he was typecast, he said, good, that means I'll never be out of work. And with Christopher Lee, with a wife and then a child to look after, we've all got to pay the bills.
Yes, we do.
And he took what I think was the mature adult attitude to it.
Absolutely. And, here we are, in 2022 discussing him.
Yes.
And, extremely favorably. If I ever see that Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee are on the screen, I stop and watch them. If anything, and, this is, kind of unfair, a bit facetious, but I mean, I just wish if there was a complaint against Peter Cushing is that we had more time with him, to have seen him do more. Because he was fantastic in Star Wars as Moff Tarkin. He was the only person who had control of Darth Vader. And the way he was just so casually evil, oh, you're far too trusting. Yeah, go ahead, nuke that planet right now. You're far too trusting. It's Steve Vader. I told you she could be reasonable. And he's just fantastic. And if you were to even see him, and we covered a movie on this show called The Horror Express, which, oh Lord.
Oh yeah, Telly Savalas.
Oh Lord, where he's in that red bathrobe. He looks like he just rolled out of bed. He's got a cigarette and like a Magnum in the other hand. And I'm like, is that Telly Savalas? And I remember watching it. And I'm like, did Peter Cushing just make a joke? because it's so against type. He's like, we're British, and you're just like, wait a minute, did Peter Cushing just tell a joke? Like, I don't get it. These guys are just, I mean, there's nobody around today that compares. And, we've kind of gone off on the tangent, so to speak, but we were talking about the state of horror today, and your insight to me that while Hollywood may be lagging, there are still lots of places around the world that are making very good horror. And unfortunately, in social media, and with few exceptions, with very few people on social media in the horror community are discussing it.
Yes.
And you turned me on to about 15 different movies. I've seen about 3 so far. I haven't had a chance to deep dive, and some aren't available on my streaming channels. But everyone that you've shown me, I think Noroi, The Curse, was amazing. And Lake, was it Mungo?
Lake Mungo? I think I recommended Lake Mungo and Lake Bodom, because both are excellent.
It was Bodom. Bodom I saw. Bodom was the one with the kids at the lake, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, it was
those underwater sequences are just incredible. Just worth it for that alone.
Wow. I mean,
but also I found the plot, the characterization, the twist, even if I found the ending a little bit unbelievable, up until that point. Oh, including that point. Well, why not have a gore fest at the end? Why not?
This idea that Asia and Europe and Latin America, I've seen quite a few. What was the one that I watched with the dubbing that we were talking about? 3 days later.
3 days, not 3 days later. On the third day.
On the third
I've got to watch that. I've seen it like 3 times already. It's so good.
If I can find a copy, a physical, because I believe in physical media. The digital libraries are too fickle. If I can own it, and you can usually find a cheap copy somewhere. But I mean, these other places around the world are making quality horror, and this is what, it's like horror is going to be fine, I think. It's Hollywood that has this sort of creative squeeze every penny kind of, and they're getting it wrong 9 times out of 10. It's like Sturgeon's law. 90% of everything
milking the cash cow till it dies. They're milking the cash cow till it dies. And it does frustrate me when you see people complaining that it's always the same old film and the same old story. So you suggest, some the same sort of things I'm suggesting to you, and they come back with, "Oh, I don't watch subtitled movies, or I don't watch foreign movies, Oh, it's European. Oh, it's in black and white." And what if you keep watching the same old shit? You'll keep going to see the same old shit. You got to.
Go ahead.
Take a leap and try something very different from what you would normally go for. And if you don't like it, well, you don't have to watch it all. You don't have to watch that kind of thing again. But
that is the issue with horror, though, in that they have a built-in fan base that will pretty much consume. I want to say they'll consume anything, but they won't. It's like they target like the crap. And that's what they, that's their dung heap, and then you try to introduce, because even Hollywood is making some really good horror. I saw, I think you've seen it, The Black Coat's Daughter.
I found it a bit boring. I liked the original take on the possession motif. But on the whole, I mean, obviously it's very well made. Look, I have admiration for anybody who actually manages to make a movie because of how complicated that is, how many people involved, how many, different skills just to get something on film and then on the screen, So I don't want to knock people who've actually managed to get a movie made. But this appealing to the lowest common denominator, it means you can't take risks, you can't do original stuff. You've got to get a certain type of look, a certain type of person.
Well, I remember talking about, because unfortunately we have another Halloween movie coming.
Oh, God.
And I covered the 2018 movie, and I said, this had the possibility, because I'm not necessarily against retcons, if you do it correctly. Okay, you're going to wipe all the other ones off the table, no problem. But I said, I'm not a filmmaker, but I could see you could probably cut about 20 minutes out of this movie, get rid of about 3 people, and you would have had a really good movie.
Yeah.
And I listed who they were. Get rid of this person, get rid of this person, don't change this retcon here. And, I'm just a fan. At the end of the day, I'm a fan like everybody else. But I said, but if I can see these things, how can they not? And what I realized was that they weren't interested in making a really good retcon. They were interested in making a trilogy. Without enough material for a trilogy.
Yeah.
So half the cast has absolutely nothing to do. And that's when I realized, wow, the wheels have just come off. The wheels have just come off. But for me in Hollywood, when it comes to horror, I'm leaning towards the smaller production houses. Those are the places that it's happening. So it's kind of like Stadium Rock, versus, the bands that may be doing a national tour of basement parties, from back in the day in the old DIY movement. They're playing the pubs, they're playing the basement parties, that type of, so in that sense, that music is going to be fine. The other food is like an Oscar Mayer hot dog, it has no impact whatsoever. It's the same sort of thing with horror. It's happening here in Latin America. It's happening in Asia. It's happening in Europe. They're banging out these high quality movies that are just for smaller audiences. Those bands that played the pubs in the 80s and 90s. Hey, maybe they only got 50 or 100 people or 10 people in there one night. They still banged out a hell of a show.
And some of them, of course, made it very big in the end,
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
But, the smaller ones, because there are not such huge amounts of money involved, they can afford to take risks.
Yeah.
They're not losing the farm.
Yeah. Yeah. Risk. You've got people in positions of leadership at these production houses that are extraordinarily risk averse, and so they're
in it to make money.
Yeah.
Not so much in it to make movies.
No, and not to make good movies.
I mean, we all need money, but do we really need millions of profit?
Here's the thing, I guess it gets back as to whether you feel that, filmmaking can be art. So are we doing that anymore? Is that even the goal anymore at these big houses? And I would argue it's not. It's just mass production. It's mass production, something new every 6 weeks. By the time you process the fact that I've just been taken, but this last crap project,
that attitude or that way of making movies, AIP made movies on that basis. Hammer made movies on that basis. So there's always been the churning out of movies, which often results in really good films, as well as resulting in the film. I often think that masterpiece movies are made by accident.
You might be right.
I really think we'd still be watching Sunset Boulevard 50 years after it was made. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? That was it low budget? I'm not too sure about that, but I'm pretty sure they had no idea they were making a horror classic that was going to be watched for generations to come, but they did.
Yeah, you're probably right. Maybe these things stumble, you just sort of stumble and you get the right mix of everything firing at the same time, and even more rarely the sequel that holds up after that. Usually once you get past part 2, things start to, you run out of source material because, the natural end of these storylines occurs and people just keep going with it. But I mean, again, I have come to believe that horror is going to be okay. But I don't mind pointing out, when something is crap, that it's crap. So, and I think that that's healthy because.
And sometimes what you get, which I find with Hollywood, is you get very well made crap.
Yeah, very polished, very smooth. Yeah.
Yeah. And I sometimes like, I don't like it when I think I'm looking at lazy filmmaking. If I get the feeling that the filmmakers just didn't care what they were doing. And you do get that sometimes. But sometimes the roughness, the rawness, the dare I say, immediacy can pack a punch where something more carefully, going out on a limb here, but I'm just trying to say that, as you might know, I watch a lot of low budget movies, and I'm really sort of championing them on because they can be very well made, and you can have, to my mind, one of the most important things is you have to have really good actors.
Sure.
They have to make you believe that they are the vampire, or that they're confronting the werewolf, or that they really are feeling the emotions that they're portraying.
Yeah.
And it's such a thing as being over-rehearsed. And I think you get that in a lot of American films, is that, I mean, imagine this, that the hero's best friend has just been horribly murdered. Now, if you or me, if our friend had been horribly murdered, we'd be pissed. I mean, we'd be basket cases.
Yeah.
Even some veterans, military veterans, fall apart when that happens to them. But we don't get that immediacy of emotion. It's almost like, oh well, my friend's dead. Oh, now I'll say something witty, and now I'll make a play for this pretty girl over there, and
it's bad story. It's bad storytelling.
So how can you believe? How can you believe?
Yeah.
Whereas I remember seeing quite a few Asian horror movies in particular are good like this. Is a character dies, and you're howling like a baby, because the pain is so real.
Yeah.
The grief is so real.
That comes back to what I was saying about characterization, and good storytelling. If you have good storytelling, good performances, probably a director who can, offer some insight but not get in the way too much, you've got a shot at it.
And enough technical proficiency, because things like wobbly scenery or visible microphone or really crap CGI, that's my bugbear, really crap CGI, that completely ruins the mood, So you've got to have a level of technical proficiency.
I would like to get back to practical effects and stunts in a perfect world. I mean, I just watched, I don't know if you saw it. Did you see Eggers, The Northman?
No, I haven't seen it.
I mean, what you can do with just acting and a storyline and very little. There's some CGI because you've got a little Norse mythology that's actively happening with the gods and the Valkyries and that sort of thing. But it doesn't need to be Thor. It doesn't need to be Hemsworth. These sorts of things. You can actually just tell a story. And unfortunately, it was a movie that I think it received some critical praise, but not a lot of people went to go see it. It's one of those things. There are people that are making movies. The 90s were filled with independent filmmakers who were making gritty stories and writing gritty scripts, whether it was Guy Ritchie or Tarantino, the emergence of Tarantino or somebody like that, or Spike Lee or Kevin Smith, or these sorts of guys who were doing it back then. And so it comes in waves. We're about due for another resurgence of that, and I hope it happens sooner rather than later.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, talk to us a little bit about movie production. Are you okay to keep going?
Well, I'm okay to keep going, but I'm just thinking, I am so low down the ladder on that one.
Well, you're higher than I am.
Well, basically, I started off. God, this is quite a complicated story. I got my first movie credit from a director and producer called A.D. Calvo. Okay. And the movie was called The Melancholy Fantastic. And I was bored, so I did a fan group for Robin Lord Taylor, who played the Penguin in Gotham.
Okay.
And so various people I met various people through that, because Robin and his husband were kind enough to give me some encouragement. And so through that, I got talking to Alex on Twitter. He told me about the Melancholy Fantastic and difficulty getting a distribution for that. So because I had a lot of time on my hands, I made a few phone calls to distributors. Nothing actually resulted from it. I made a few phone calls, and I did a hashtag and got some people to do artwork for it, some of Robin's fans, because fangirl power is a real thing, to do some artwork, to give a bit of promotion for it. And in the end, Alex recut it, changed some of the music, retitled it Doll in the Dark, and was able to get a distributor for that and put my name on it under special thanks, which I wasn't expecting. And I was so thrilled. I thought, I like that. How do I get another one? And so through various things, I met, no, what was his name? Ooh, I feel terrible, I can't. Anyway, there's an actor called Jonathan Hanser and his friends Joe Riley and such and such. So through them, I met the people at Hex. Jonathan Hanser, very good actor, by the way, was doing a film that was initially called Automata, but was then released as, let's get this right, The Devil's Machine. So I did some publicity for that, low level, of course. It's also through social media. And gosh, I can't remember everything I did. And at the same time, one of Jonathan Hanser's friends, Joe Riley, and two of his friends were making a little film called Plenty of Dishes. So I gave a bit of help here and made some phone calls there and pushed a bit here. And they both gave me credits. The people behind The Devil's Machine are Hex Studios. So they gave me a credit under special thanks. And then I got one from Tripod Productions, which did Plenty of Dishes. Sorry, this is a complete info dump here, isn't it? And so they gave me a special thanks too. And I was invited to the premiere, which was wonderful, great fun. And, it's, so anyway, basically I help out wherever I can. I help raise money through various fundraisers like Kickstarter. Sometimes I ask friends favors if they'll give it a tweet to promote it, to also get the word out. Sometimes I introduce people to people. I do Hex Studios social media for their Hex Arcana it's the publishing arm of their movie company, because I'll tell you one thing about Hex Studios. They are the most resourceful, inventive, industrious people. They inspire me with awe, So even though I'm loosely affiliated with them, I get producer credits on anything that they do. Yes. And I'm thrilled to bits, So I may be very low on the ladder, but I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it because I can say I'm in the movies.
That's, I believe that's how it's done.
Good for you. And who knows where it's going to go? I may not get any higher, but it's about feeling useful, being appreciated, Yeah. And also staving off the boredom.
In the same way that, I just run this show out of my back room, now I'm talking to you, and, talking to others. And, it's just, you think it up and you do what you can. And, you keep putting the work to it. And, it does bear fruit. And it's as good a message as any to anyone out there who would like to try something. And we live in an age where, luckily these sorts of things and opportunities with a little bit of work and some knowledge are, accessible to everyone. Everyone can have a chance.
Yes.
It's not like the days when we were kids, this sort of thing, must have been on the moon, that kind of, access and, so I have this expression when I hear stories like this, so on and so forth, or I'll see a good podcast or, a good conversation, and I'll say, this is what the internet is supposed to be, and that's your story is a perfect example of that, and the way that you put it to use.
Yes.
Well, I said I would keep you for about an hour. It's been a little bit past that. I think for now, this is as good a place as any to bring this to a close. Is there anything? Why don't you tell people where they can find you? Where can they find your content? What's your social media bona fides? Where are you available? So on and so forth.
Well, I'm Julia Morgan Scorpion on Twitter. I'm Julia Morgan on Facebook. Have good luck finding me there. I can't find myself there sometimes. My YouTube channel is Morgan Scorpion. I'm on, let's see where else. I'm on Instagram, Julia Morgan 5. There's nothing much happening there. And that's it, really.
What can they find on the YouTube?
They can find a lot of horror stories, ghost stories, little bits of poetry. I sing sometimes. So there's a little bit of that. And they can find my recording of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Lots of Lovecraft, M.R. James, Arthur Machen, Algernon Blackwood, and some modern authors too.
Do you have any... Okay, stop that feedback. Do you have any upcoming audio projects, that you're like, I'm maybe in a week or so, or anything like that? Anything you want to plug? Something?
Well, at the moment, I'm trying to bring out a short story every Saturday.
Okay.
So I've got quite a long list of things that I want to record. I've got two or three, I'm actually not quite sure how many stories already recorded that need editing. I do have problems with my voice from time to time, partly because I started really late recording, late in life, and partly because I tend to get a lot of sore throats, sinus infections and things. So I try to build up a prudent reserve of stories so that if I lose my voice for recording purposes, there'll be something to put up. I've got my eye on rather a lot of creepypastas at the moment, and I do want to do some of the SCP Foundation ones. And I really, really want to do H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth, but I don't really have the courage to tackle the character of Zadok Allen. So,
I think the cure for that is just to open the page and start talking.
I may do that.
Nothing.
Oh, and if I can do a plug for something, that Hex Studios, those beautiful people, are making a movie called Linger. It's on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, so they're covering their bases. The Indiegogo is mainly for those people who can't use Kickstarter, because apparently for some reason some people can't use Kickstarter. Okay. But do check it out, Linger, Linger, because they've already shot some footage for it, and if they can keep that up, which they probably can, it's going to be a really frightening film.
Okay. Fantastic. And
thank you.
Aside from here on YouTube, this is streaming on Twitch and Twitter. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow will be uploaded to Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Good Pods, and pretty much anywhere that you can find audio versions of. There'll be audio version only, but I don't do any editing for these conversations because I like the organic feel of it. Okay. And so I just kind of let them go as is, and that works for me. Mm. Well, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to chew the fat, so to speak. I appreciate it. I appreciate you very much. I hope
thank you.
That I can have you back on again.
Like that.
Yeah, anytime that you'd like to come back, just let me know and we'll set up the time. Whatever you'd like to discuss works for me. Mm-hmm. My thanks to Julia Morgan Scorpion You can find her on YouTube and her audiobook collections, a bit of poetry, maybe some singing, and her other social media outlet, I guess where you're most active is Twitter.
Yes.
And check out, there are tons of references that she's made here, whether it be for sources for audiobooks, where we talked about where you can find, the best quality horror films that are happening today outside of Hollywood, because Hollywood is a whole separate conversation. Horror authors. We've covered a lot here in 70 minutes, and it was the conversation I was hoping to have. So my thanks to you. Stick around after I close this out. I'll be back on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. The schedule is a little tentative. I might have a show on Thursday if I could get my friend on. But until then, all the best, everybody. And